Why you return to what already hurts you. There is a pattern that confuses many people. You leave something because it hurts. A situation, a thought pattern, a relationship dynamic, a way of living that has already shown you its cost. You see the damage, you feel the exhaustion, you know the shape of the pain, and yet, at some point, you return. Not always physically, sometimes mentally, emotionally, internally. You return to the same atmosphere, the same structure, the same kind of suffering. This creates shame, because from the outside it looks irrational. Why would anyone return to what already hurt them? Why move back toward what was already known to be painful? The answer is rarely that pain was wanted. The answer is that pain was familiar, and familiarity has a psychological weight that comfort does not always have. The mind does not organize itself only around what feels good. It organizes itself around what feels known. Known reactions, known disappointments, known tensions, known ways of shrinking, hoping, enduring, and explaining. Even painful structures can create orientation. You know who you are inside them. You know what to expect. You know how to survive there. That matters more than most people realize. Because what hurts you can still feel easier to inhabit than what you do not yet know how to live inside. This is why unfamiliar peace can feel less believable than familiar pain. Pain that repeats has a structure, it has language, timing, a role for you to play. You know when to brace, when to withdraw, when to explain, when to hope again. And because the pattern is known, the system relaxes into it even while suffering inside it. This is the part most people miss. Returning is not always a movement toward pain. Often it is a movement toward structure, towards something the system already knows how to organize itself around. New territory may be healthier, but health without familiarity can feel unstable. It can feel too open, too undefined, too unstructured. There is no old script there, no practiced emotional posture, no predictable disappointment. And because there is no script, the nervous system does not immediately know how to settle. So the mind begins to romanticize the old pattern, not because it was good, because it was legible. You could read it, anticipate it, recognize yourself inside it. This is why people often return right after progress begins, not because the progress was false, but because the new reality has not yet become familiar enough to feel inhabitable. The old pain still knows your name. The old identity still has a room waiting for you. And when uncertainty rises, the system often chooses what is already mapped, even if the map leads back to suffering. This is why return can feel almost magnetic, not dramatic, not even fully conscious. Just a slow leaning back toward what already knows how to hold your patterns in place. A painful structure can still feel like home if the self was built inside it. And that is where this pattern begins to reveal itself. Not in the pain alone, in the bond between pain and familiarity. What makes this pattern so persuasive is that familiarity does not feel like familiarity. It feels like instinct. It feels like, this is just where I end up. This is just what I'm drawn to. This is just what feels real. But what feels real is often only what has been repeated enough to stop feeling questionable. The body remembers what the mind no longer examines. It remembers the rhythm of certain disappointments, the emotional texture of certain dynamics, the pressure, the waiting, the collapse, the return. And because these rhythms have been lived many times, the system stops reading them as warnings. It starts reading them as orientation. This is why pain does not automatically teach distance. Sometimes it teaches familiarity. Sometimes the mind learns how to function inside suffering so well that suffering starts to feel more believable than relief. Relief can feel exposed. Relief has less identity in it, less struggle, less narrative, less proof of who you have been. Pain, especially repeated pain, can feel more solid. It confirms things. It confirms old beliefs, old fears, old conclusions. It says, yes, this is still true. Yes, this is still who you are. Yes, this is still the world you know. And confirmation has a strange comfort, even when it hurts. This is why leaving a painful pattern is not only about leaving pain, it is also about leaving the identity that pain supported. And that is harder, because now you are not just without the pattern, you are without the version of yourself that knew how to exist inside it. That in-between state can feel empty, unstructured, unfamiliar, psychologically uninhabited. So the return begins, not always with a decision, sometimes with a thought, sometimes with a memory, sometimes with a small reopening to what had already been closed, a little contact, a little old thinking, a little emotional drift back toward the known. And because the known feels easier to enter, the movement continues. This is why the return often happens quietly, not as a dramatic choice, as a reduction of uncertainty, as a return to what already knows how to organize your inner world. The pain is still there, but now it comes with orientation. And for many systems, orientation feels safer than possibility. That is why return happens, not because suffering is desired, because the familiar still feels more livable than the unknown. This is where the pattern begins to loosen. Not when the old pain stops calling you, but when familiarity is no longer mistaken for truth. The old structure may still feel magnetic. The old tone, the old longing, the old emotional climate may still feel strangely persuasive. But now, something else is seen. You begin to notice that what pulls you back is not always love, not always intuition, not always meaning. Sometimes it is recognition, the system recognizing a shape it already knows how to survive. That recognition feels immediate, but immediate does not mean trustworthy. It only means practiced. This is the deeper shift. You stop asking, why am I drawn to this? And begin asking, what part of me already knows this environment too well? That question changes the whole field, because now the return is no longer romanticized. It is observed, not judged, not dramatized, seen. A movement toward what already knows how to organize your identity, your tension, your expectations, your role. And once that movement is seen, it loses some of its innocence. The return is no longer confused with destiny. It becomes pattern, a learned leaning back toward what feels inhabitable, even when it hurts. This does not make the pull disappear, but it changes your relationship to it. You do not have to obey every sense of recognition. You do not have to trust every feeling of home. Some things feel like home because they were repeated, not because they were good. Some things feel right because they are familiar, not because they are true. That difference matters, because once the familiar stops being idealized, the new stops feeling so empty. It may still feel uncertain, but uncertainty is no longer automatically treated as a mistake. It becomes the natural atmosphere of leaving an old pattern before a new one has settled. This is the threshold, not between pain and pleasure, between repetition and reality, between what already knows your wounds and what has not yet learned how to contain you. Staying away from old pain is not only an act of strength, it is an act of tolerating the unfamiliar quiet, the unfamiliar openness, the unfamiliar absence of the old emotional script. That is what makes the new so difficult at first, not because it is wrong, because it has not yet become a place your system knows how to live inside. But if you stay there long enough, something changes. The old pain loses its authority, not because it was defeated, because it is no longer the only structure that feels real. And that is when the return begins to weaken, not all at once, but enough for you to stop calling it fate. This is inner cognition.